Let me ask you something. If I offered you a job right now at a perfectly competitive company, great salary, solid team, reasonable hours, would you take it? Most people would say yes. Peter Thiel says that's exactly the wrong answer. And he's the guy who co-founded PayPal, made the first outside investment in Facebook, a $500,000 check that became worth over $1 billion, and built one of the most successful venture capital firms in Silicon Valley history. So when Peter Thiel says most people are thinking about business completely backwards, it's worth listening. Here's his argument in one sentence. Everything you've been taught about competition, innovation, and building a successful company is wrong. Not slightly off, not a little outdated. Wrong. Business schools teach you to compete. Consultants teach you to benchmark against rivals. This is 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel, one of the most important business books written in the last 20 years. Required reading at Stanford, taught in MBA programs across America, and endorsed by some of the sharpest minds in the country. Before we get into the ideas, let's establish why this man deserves your attention for the next 30 minutes. Peter Thiel grew up in Cleveland, Ohio. He was a chess prodigy as a kid, nationally ranked. He went to Stanford for undergrad, then Stanford Law School, then clerked for a federal judge. He was on track to be a Supreme Court clerk, one of the most prestigious positions in American law. He didn't get it. And that rejection, he says, was one of the best things that ever happened to him, because it forced him to stop following the conventional path and start thinking about what he actually wanted to build. He moved to Silicon Valley. In 1998, he co-founded PayPal with a small team of engineers and entrepreneurs. They sold it to eBay in 2002 for $1.5 billion. Then, while most people would have taken a decade off, he turned around and wrote a $500,000 check to a 19-year-old Harvard dropout named Mark Zuckerberg. That investment in Facebook became one of the most profitable early-stage bets in the history of venture capital. He then co-founded Palantir, a data analytics company now worth tens of billions. He started Founders Fund, which has backed SpaceX, Airbnb, Lyft, and Spotify. In 2012, he went back to Stanford and taught a course on startups. A student named Blake Masters took extraordinary notes. Those notes went viral. And the book that came out of them, 0 to 1, sold millions of copies and changed how a generation of entrepreneurs think about building companies. This is not a book about tactics. It is not a book about growth hacks or marketing funnels or how to run a great meeting. It is a book about how to think, about business, about progress, about the future. And it starts with the most important distinction in the book. There are two kinds of progress in the world. Horizontal progress, going from 1 to n, means copying what works, scaling what already exists, spreading it wider. If you take a working typewriter and build 100 more, that's horizontal progress. Globalization is horizontal progress, taking what works in America and replicating it in 50 other countries. Vertical progress, going from 0 to 1, means doing something that has never been done before, creating something genuinely new, something that could not exist without a fundamentally new idea. The typewriter to the word processor, that's 0 to 1. The word processor copied 100 times, that's 1 to n. Thiel's argument is this: the entire modern obsession with scaling, globalization, and competition is focused on 1 to n. And while 1 to n has value, it is not where extraordinary wealth, impact, or meaning gets created. 0 to 1 is the only thing that actually changes the world, and almost nobody is doing it.
The most important interview question in Silicon Valley. Thiel opens the book with a question he says he asks every single person who interviews at his companies. What important truth do very few people agree with you on? Simple, devastating, almost impossible to answer well. Try it right now. Think of something you believe that most people around you don't. If you said, our education system is broken, or politicians are corrupt, or social media is making us anxious, those don't count. Those are contrarian-sounding positions that are actually shared by tens of millions of people. They're widely held complaints dressed up as personal insight. A genuine answer to this question is rare and genuinely uncomfortable, because a real contrarian belief, one that very few people share, makes you sound crazy to most people.
Here's why this question matters for business. Every great company, Thiel argues, was built on a secret, a truth about the world that almost nobody believed, a contrarian insight that turned out to be right. Before Airbnb existed, the conventional wisdom was clear. People will not rent their homes to strangers. Too weird, too risky, too uncomfortable. The idea was dismissed by dozens of investors before it became a company worth tens of billions. Before Uber existed, the conventional wisdom was equally clear. People will not get into strangers' cars. That is objectively dangerous. The idea was considered naive at best, irresponsible at worst. Both of those companies were built on secrets, truths about human behavior that turned out to be real, but that almost nobody believed before they were proven. So Thiel's opening challenge is this. Do you have a secret? Do you know something important that the world doesn't know yet? A truth about technology, about human behavior, about an industry, about a problem that almost nobody else has figured out? Because if you don't, if you're building a company based on ideas that everyone already agrees are good, you're not going from 0 to 1. You're going from 1 to N. And the companies that were there before you have a massive head start. The most valuable businesses of the next decade will be built on secrets that don't exist yet. Or rather, secrets that exist right now, hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone who believes they're real. What's yours? To understand how people in tech think about startups today, you have to understand one of the most traumatic events in American business history: the dot-com crash of 2000. In the late 1990s, the internet was new, the future was electric, and money was flowing into tech companies with the kind of irrational enthusiasm that only happens once or twice in a generation. Companies with no revenue, no business model, and no realistic path to profitability were raising hundreds of millions of dollars and going public at insane valuations. Then, it all collapsed. The Nasdaq lost 80% of its value. Trillions of dollars evaporated. Thousands of companies went bankrupt. An entire generation of entrepreneurs was scarred. And from those scars came a new set of commandments, the rules that Silicon Valley adopted to make sure it would never repeat the mistakes of the dot-com era. Number 1, make incremental advances. Grand visions are delusional. Modest, step-by-step progress is what works. Number 2, stay lean and flexible. Don't plan too far ahead. Iterate. Pivot. Don't commit to a direction you might need to change. Number 3, improve on competition. Don't try to create a new market. Improve what already exists and compete for existing demand. Number 4, focus on product, not sales. If your product is truly great,
customers will find it. Sales and marketing are for companies with bad products. These 4 rules became gospel in Silicon Valley. They are taught in startup accelerators.
They are preached by venture capitalists. They are the foundation of the lean startup methodology that has dominated entrepreneurial thinking for the last 15 years. And Thiel says they are almost exactly backwards. The correct lessons from the dot-com crash, he argues, are the precise opposites.
It is better to risk boldness than triviality. Companies that play it safe don't build anything that matters. A bad plan is better than no plan. Indefinite thinking produces indefinite results. The discipline of planning, even imperfect planning, forces clarity about what you're building and why. Competitive markets destroy profits. The obsession with competing in existing markets is a trap. The goal should be to create a new market where you have no competition. Sales matters as much as product. If you have to tell people your product sells itself, it probably doesn't. Distribution is not a luxury. It is half the battle. This inversion is the intellectual DNA of everything that follows in the book. Thiel is not interested in helping you play the existing startup game more skillfully. He wants to convince you that the game most startups are playing is the wrong game entirely.
The monopoly argument. Competition is for losers. This is the chapter that makes people uncomfortable, and it's also the most important one in the book. Thiel opens with a statement that sounds almost offensive to anyone who took a basic economics class. Competition is for losers. Now, before you dismiss that, let him explain. Economists have spent decades telling us that competition is the engine of prosperity. Competition drives down prices, improves quality, and produces the best outcomes for consumers. And Thiel agrees. For consumers, competition is great for consumers. But for businesses, competition is catastrophic. Let me give you his 2 examples, and they're perfect. Example 1, the American restaurant industry. Every year, American restaurants collectively generate hundreds of billions of dollars in revenue. Millions of Americans eat out every single day. It is one of the largest industries in the country.
Example 2. Google. In 2014, the year Thiel wrote this book, Google's search and advertising business generated more profit than every American airline combined. Think about that. Airlines carry hundreds of millions of passengers every year. They operate some of the most complex logistics in human history. They are essential infrastructure, and their collective profits were smaller than one tech company's search engine. How? Because Google, in search, has no real competition. Google owns roughly 90% of global search. It sets its own prices. It can invest in moonshots, self-driving cars, life extension research, quantum computing, because its core business throws off so much cash that it doesn't need to be careful with it. It can pay some of the highest salaries in the world and still generate extraordinary returns for shareholders. The difference between these 2 situations is not skill. It's not effort. It's not how good the product is. The difference is market structure. The restaurant is in a competitive market. Google is a monopoly. And here's where Thiel makes a crucial distinction, because the word monopoly carries a lot of political baggage in America. He is not talking about the bad kind of monopoly, the kind where a company crushes competitors through regulatory capture, predatory pricing, or political manipulation. Standard Oil, AT&T, the kind of monopoly that the Department of Justice spends decades breaking up. He's talking about what he calls a creative monopoly, a company that earned its dominant position by building something so genuinely new and so genuinely good that no one else can meaningfully compete.
Apple didn't crush its competitors. It created an entirely new category of device. Google didn't steal search customers from a competitor. It built a search engine so much better than anything before it that competitors became irrelevant. Amazon didn't destroy retail through predatory pricing alone. It created a logistics and infrastructure operation that nobody could replicate. These are creative monopolies. They got to where they are not by crushing competition, but by making competition irrelevant. And that is the goal. Not to be better than your competitors, not to outrun them or outspend them or outmarket them, to build something so new, so valuable, so genuinely different that the concept of competition simply doesn't apply. Don't compete. Create. The ideology of competition. Why smart people play the wrong game. If monopoly is so clearly superior to competition, why do so many smart, talented, ambitious people spend their careers in brutally competitive industries? This is the question Thiel spends an entire chapter on, and his answer is philosophical and uncomfortable. We are addicted to competition, not because it's rational, because it's what we're taught. From the earliest age, we are trained to compete. In school, grades are zero-sum. Your A is relative to your classmate's B. We compete in sports, in college admissions, in job applications. We fight for spots at prestigious universities, not purely because the education is better, but because the prestige is relative. A Harvard degree is valuable partly because most people don't have one. We carry this competitive instinct into our professional lives. The most academically talented undergraduates in America compete to get into top law schools. Then they compete to get to top law firms. Then they compete to make partner. At every stage, they are measured against peers. They are optimized for winning competitions. And at the end of this long, exhausting competitive climb, if they win, they find themselves in a commoditized industry where they are selling hours of their time in a market with thin margins and brutal hours. Thiel's observation is stark. The very act of winning a fierce competition is evidence that you're in the wrong place. If a market is competitive enough that you had to fight hard to get in, it's competitive enough to destroy your profits once you're there. He uses a personal story to illustrate this. In the early days of online payments, PayPal and Elon Musk's company X.com were locked in a vicious battle for the same market. Both companies were spending aggressively to win customers, burning cash to outdo each other, pouring resources into a fight that was making both companies weaker. Eventually, Thiel and Musk sat down and made a decision that looks obvious in retrospect, but was remarkably hard to make in the heat of competition. They merged. The combined company, still called PayPal, stopped fighting itself and started building a dominant position in online payments. That company sold for $1.5 billion 2 years later. The fight that had consumed both organizations turned out to be the biggest threat to both of them. The lesson Thiel draws from this, sometimes the smartest competitive move is to stop competing. And the deeper lesson, before you enter any competition, whether it's a market, a career path, or an industry, ask yourself whether winning that competition actually leads somewhere worth going. The American education system produces extraordinary competitors. It is less good at producing people who ask whether the competition itself is worth winning. Last mover advantage. Why being first isn't enough. One of the most persistent myths in startup culture is the importance of being first to market. Get there first, move fast, plant the flag before anyone else does. Thiel says this is mostly wrong. Being first only matters if you can sustain your lead long enough to build something durable. If you're first, but a better funded competitor can replicate what you've built in 6 months, first place means nothing. What matters is not who gets to the market first. What matters is who makes the final great move. Who builds the position that becomes impossible to dislodge. Thiel calls this last mover advantage. The best example is Google itself. The first search engine was not Google. There were dozens of search engines before Google. Alta Vista, Yahoo, Lycos, Excite, Ask Jeeves. They were all there first. And none of them built a durable monopoly.
Google arrived late and built something so much better that it locked in a position that no competitor has been able to meaningfully challenge in over 20 years. Google made the last great move in search. So, how do you build a position like that? How do you build something durable? Thiel identifies 4 characteristics that define genuinely durable monopolies. He calls them the 4 pillars of last mover advantage.
Pillar 1. Proprietary technology. Your core technology must be so good, so far ahead, that it is genuinely difficult for a competitor to replicate. And Thiel gives a specific benchmark here that I find really clarifying. Your technology needs to be at least 10 times better than the closest alternative in some important dimension. Not 10% better, not twice as good, 10 times better. Anything less is an incremental improvement that a well-funded competitor can match. 10x is the threshold at which you create a genuine moat. Amazon's original inventory was 10x more extensive than any physical bookstore. Google's search results were 10x more relevant than anything before it. iPhone's touch interface was 10x more intuitive than the smartphone keyboards it replaced. What is your product 10x better at? Pillar 2. Network effects. The most powerful monopolies are built on products that become more valuable as more people use them. Facebook is more useful if all your friends are on it. PayPal is more valuable with more merchants and buyers. The iPhone's App Store becomes more valuable with every new app developer. A product with strong network effects becomes almost impossible to displace once it reaches critical mass, because the value comes from the network itself, not just the product.
Pillar 3. Economies of scale. Great businesses get better as they get bigger. The cost of adding one more customer should ideally be near zero. Software businesses have this property naturally. Once you've built the software, the cost of selling it to the millionth user is essentially zero. A restaurant doesn't have this property. The cost of serving the 1,000th customer is roughly the same as serving the first. If your business doesn't get more efficient as it grows, it can't build a durable monopoly. Pillar 4. Branding. A strong brand creates a monopoly of perception. Apple is the most powerful example of this in American business. Apple's brand is so strong that millions of people pay a significant premium for products that are, in many cases, technically comparable to lower-priced alternatives. The brand itself creates a kind of psychological monopoly. People aren't just buying a phone. They're buying membership in a certain way of seeing themselves. A strong brand is hard to build and nearly impossible to steal, which makes it one of the most durable competitive advantages in existence. The question to ask yourself about any business you're building or any company you're analyzing is, which of these 4 pillars does this company have? 1 is a start. 2,
is strong. 3 is exceptional. 4 is a generational company. You are not a lottery ticket. The power of definite optimism. One of the most original sections of the book has nothing to do with tactics or strategy. It's about how to think about the future. Thiel identifies 4 worldviews, 4 ways that people and societies relate to what's coming next. Indefinite pessimism. The future will be worse, and there's nothing to do about it. This describes much of Europe, where demographic and economic decline is widely accepted as inevitable. You can't change it, you can only watch. Definite pessimism. The future will be worse, but you can prepare for it. This describes China's leadership, which plans meticulously for a difficult future, stockpiling resources, developing infrastructure, projecting strength. Indefinite optimism. The future will be better, but we have no specific idea how or why. Thiel argues this describes the dominant worldview of America's financial and business elite. They believe progress will happen through processes no one fully controls, diversification, best practices, innovation ecosystems, rather than through specific, bold plans.
Definite optimism. The future will be better because of specific, ambitious plans that we will execute. This is the worldview of the great builders of history, the engineers who designed the Golden Gate Bridge, the scientists who put Americans on the moon, the founders who built companies that reshaped civilization. Thiel is devastating in his critique of indefinite optimism, the worldview that currently dominates America's elite culture. In a world of indefinite optimism, he argues, nobody builds anything specific. Money flows into finance, into diversified portfolios that bet on everything and nothing simultaneously. Talented people go to consulting and investment banking, where the work product is process, not creation. Even the most successful tech companies hoard cash rather than deploying it, because in an indefinite world, you don't have a specific vision of what to invest in. He makes a sharp observation. The 3 most successful companies in America at the time of writing, Apple, Google, and Microsoft, were collectively sitting on more than $200 billion in cash. $200 billion. Uninvested. Why? Because their leaders don't have a specific enough vision of the future to know what to do with it. Indefinite optimism produces indefinite results. Thiel's prescription? Cultivate definite optimism. Make specific plans. Take specific bets. Work toward a specific vision of the future instead of hoping good things emerge from optimized processes. This connects directly to his concept of secrets. Thiel believes the world is still full of important truths that almost no one has discovered. Secrets hiding in plain sight. And great companies are built by people who believe secrets exist and who go actively looking for them.
The best secrets, he says, are found by asking questions the world has stopped asking. What is forbidden or taboo to think about? What has everyone in an industry accepted as true without ever really questioning? What problem does everyone assume is too hard or too strange to solve? Airbnb found a secret. People actually will share their homes with strangers. Uber found a secret. People actually will get into strangers' cars. What secret are you uniquely positioned to find? The PayPal Mafia. How to build a team that changes the world. No company is built alone, but the wrong team will destroy the best idea in the world. Thiel is unusually specific about what the right team looks like, and he draws directly from his own experience building PayPal. PayPal's founding team was one of the most remarkable in Silicon Valley history.
The co-founders and early employees went on to found or co-found YouTube, LinkedIn, Yelp, Palantir, and SpaceX. They made early investments in Facebook, Airbnb, and dozens of other transformative companies. This group became known as the PayPal Mafia, and it stands as one of the greatest concentrations of entrepreneurial talent in tech history. How did that happen? Thiel says it wasn't luck, it was intentional, and he gives 3 principles that explain it. Principle 1. Founders must know each other deeply before working together. The greatest startups almost always emerge from existing relationships, college friendships, shared missions, previous companies. The risks of building a founding team with people you don't know well are enormous. In a small company, every person's judgment, character, and commitment matters at a level that simply doesn't exist in large organizations. You cannot afford to discover character flaws under pressure. Principle 2. Everyone has one clearly defined role, and only one. Ambiguity about who owns what is one of the most common and most destructive sources of conflict in early-stage companies. When 2 people both feel responsible for the same thing, or worse, when nobody feels responsible for something important, you get politics, resentment, and wasted energy at exactly the moment you need total focus. One person, one role, clear ownership. That's it. Principle 3. Every person on the team must believe they are working on the most important problem in the world. Not important to the company, not important to investors, important to the world. This conviction, even when it's a little irrational, even when it's hard to prove, is what separates teams that push through the inevitable brutal periods from teams that quit when things get hard. Thiel is also honest about startup culture, in a way most founders aren't. He says, don't recruit people with perks. Don't recruit people with prestige. Recruit people who believe in the mission, in the specific thing you are trying to build. If someone is primarily excited about the free lunches, the stock options, and the ability to put a famous startup on their resume, they are almost certainly not the right person for the earliest, hardest stages of building something new. Mission-driven teams build generational companies. Perk-driven teams build nothing. The founder's paradox. What great founders actually look like. We tend to have a very specific image of what a great business leader looks like. Polished, composed, articulate, reasonable, someone who makes people feel comfortable. Thiel spends an entire chapter arguing that this image has almost nothing to do with what actually builds transformative companies. The most impactful founders in history, the ones who created companies that genuinely changed the world, share a set of traits that look, frankly, a little strange from the outside. Bill Gates, Harvard dropout, built the most dominant software empire in history while being described alternately as a genius and a ruthless monopolist. Steve Jobs, adopted, college dropout, famous for being impossible to work with, for berating employees publicly, for levels of perfectionism that most people experience as cruelty. Also, the creative force behind the most valuable company in the world. Elon Musk, described by some as the greatest entrepreneur of his generation, described by others as a reckless, impulsive egomaniac, often both by the same people, sometimes in the same week. Jeff Bezos built Amazon by being obsessively, almost irrationally, long-term in a business culture consumed by quarterly earnings. His patience looked like delusion to most analysts for most of the company's history. It turned out to be one of the greatest competitive advantages in business history. What do these people share? Not a personality type, not a management style,
not a background. What they share is a willingness, almost a compulsion, to hold beliefs about the future that the world tells them are wrong, and to act on those beliefs with total conviction for years or decades before they are proven right. Thiel calls this the founder's paradox. The very traits that make great founders effective, the obsessive conviction, the willingness to ignore consensus, the refusal to accept conventional wisdom, are the exact same traits that make them difficult, polarizing, and sometimes destructive as human beings.
You cannot have one without the other. The qualities that build transformative companies are inseparable from the qualities that make founders hard to work with. The vision that allows someone to see what nobody else can see is the same cognitive wiring that makes them dismissive of perspectives they don't share. Thiel's conclusion is not that founders should try to be more normal. It is that the rest of us, investors, employees, customers, journalists, should develop a more sophisticated understanding of what great founding actually looks like. It almost never looks like what we've been told to look for.
The 7 questions every business must answer. Near the end of the book, Thiel distills everything into 7 questions. He says every business, every startup, every new venture, every company considering a new market must be able to answer these questions honestly. If you can't answer them, or if your answers are weak, you are not going from 0 to 1. You are going from 1 to N. And the companies already at N have a massive head start on you. Question 1. Engineering. Can you create breakthrough technology, something genuinely 10x better than the nearest alternative? Or are you making incremental improvement? 7 questions. Most startups can't answer more than 3 of them well. The ones that can answer all 7 clearly, with genuine, honest answers, not optimistic projections, are the ones that build something that lasts. Run your idea through these 7 questions right now. The gaps in your answers are the risks in your business. Conclusion. The takeaway. What it actually means to go from 0 to 1. Let me bring this all together. 0 to 1 is not a business tactics book. It is not a framework for running better meetings or writing better marketing copy. It is a challenge to the way most ambitious people in America think about what they are doing with their professional lives. The central argument is simple and radical. The world does not need more people competing more skillfully in existing markets. The world needs people who are willing to build things that don't exist yet. The restaurant competing against 3 other restaurants on the same block. The startup trying to build a slightly better version of something that already exists. The career built entirely around winning competitions designed by other people. None of that is 0 to 1. 0 to 1 is finding a secret, a truth the world isn't ready to accept, and building a company on top of it. It's creating a product so genuinely new that competition becomes irrelevant. It's building a monopoly through creation rather than through conquest. It's asking not how do I beat my competitors, but what valuable company is nobody building? The future of America, of the economy, of technology, of human progress will not be written by the best competitors. It will be written by the best creators. People who go from 0 to 1. The question is whether you'll be one of them. That is the complete breakdown of 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel, one of the most important business books of the last 20 years. If this video challenged the way you think about business, about competition, about what it actually means to build something, hit the like button. It genuinely helps Book Decoded reach more people who need these ideas. And if you want to keep decoding the books that actually matter, the ones that change how you think, not just what you know, subscribe to Book Decoded. New decode every week. I'll see you in the next one.